at 7:04. First order of business.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I get a motion to approve the agenda? We're going to need a roll call vote. Roll call vote to approve the agenda. Bill Desotter, aye. Eric Brown, aye.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
All right, approved. Could I get a motion to approve the minutes from January 10th, 2022?
Motion to approve the minutes from January 10th, 2022. Second.
Roll call vote.
Joyce Scully, aye.
Bill Desotter, aye. Eric Brown, aye.
Sean Nicholson, aye.
Is approved. School committee chairperson comments. I have no comments. Carrying on. I think we're fine. We'll move along. Community comments. Any community members? I don't know if we have anybody online.
I have Alicia Bassoli raising a hand.
Okay.
So Alicia, if you could state your name and where you're from for the committee.
Sure. Hey, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Alicia Pasoli from Upton. I was just curious, and I'm not sure if this is possible, but would it be amenable to add a community comment or questions section at the end of the agenda in case questions arise on the content presented?
So normally we have the community comments in the beginning. If we have a topic that seems to have a lot of areas where the community wants to voice their opinion, that by all manners fine, but we have this structure in place because I think it's the most effective way for us to conduct the meeting. Normally during the presentations, it's normally the board members who are the ones asking the questions, not necessarily the community members. We normally have taken their comments in and we ask those questions. So if there's very specific areas you'd like us to address or you're interested in knowing more about, happy to, take those and understand them.
Okay, thanks, Phil. I was just, I know this came up in a committee meeting earlier in the year, and I just thought maybe there were some of the budget presentations, there could be some questions come up, but maybe perhaps if presenters could simply say, if you have questions, who and where to contact them after the meeting, that might be helpful as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think for clarity's sake, for people to understand and know, if you have questions regarding the budget presentations, you can either call and reach out to Dr. Cohen, or you can reach out to the individual or person that made the presentation themselves.
Thanks.
So, thank you. Any other community comments? All right. Then with that, we'll move on to student comments.
So first, I'd like to mention that this Wednesday we'll be having DECA districts competition, and that's basically a competition where emerging leaders and entrepreneurs in marketing, finance, hospitality, and management from all around the globe in high schools and colleges will compete together. And our school is going to be participating in the districts competition this Wednesday at the DC Center. And then we will also have a Nimbuck showcase event on March 8th. And that's for incoming freshmen and their parents and guardians to kind of take a look around at Nimbuck, meet the teachers, get a feel of what learning and being at their campus. So we're excited about that. And then today is officially the end of term 2, which means that you're halfway through the year. And tomorrow is McMuck's Spirit Day, so we're looking forward to it.
And I'd like to comment on 2 things. The first being the Nimbuck Spanish Exchange Program, and then Jazz Night, which is happening tomorrow. So the Foreign Language Department is seeking students who are interested in resuming the program for the 2022-2023 school year. This program provides Nimbuck Spanish-speaking students the opportunity to travel to Spain for 2 weeks and to stay at a host family's house there. And then the student will also host a Spanish student in their own home. It's just a great way to immerse yourself in the culture, get that traveling experience. The program wants interested students to contact Mrs. Maloney at her school email. The second thing is the jazz night that's happening tomorrow. So the jazz ensemble and the lab band are having a normal jazz night, which is an annual thing that they do due to the pandemic. So this will be more of a workshop type occasion for the musicians, and they'll be primarily working on their improv skills and playing, which is a huge part of jazz. And we'll be working with 2 performers and educators in the area to accomplish this. At the end of the night, they'll be live streaming kind of an improv performance, which I think is exciting. That should be about around 8 p.m.
Great. Yeah. Any other questions? All right, Superintendent and Administrator comments. Turn it over to Dr. Cohen.
All right. Well, thanks for having us. We have lots of different topics tonight. The first, what I'm going to do is give a little bit of an overview regarding superintendent goals for the year. We had our evaluation subcommittee. We had a meeting just last week where I provided a draft of the goals, and you all received it in a packet. A few meetings back, we had the draft and then we reviewed it, and I got a few points of feedback and made a couple of changes to that. So that's linked into your background notes, as well as this presentation. We're just going to give a high-level overview of what the goals are and how the process works. So if you're able to pull that up. Thanks, Sam. Okay. If you go to the next slide. Great. So the first thing I wanted to point out, and something we talked about last week, was that we're really intentional about our district alignment of goals. Now, I don't know if this chart is perfect for the hierarchy, but I kind of made it just to give a sense of how some of it works. All of our goals, we try to align to our strategic plan. So everything begins with this strategic plan. We roll out the action. It's a 5-year plan. We roll out action steps at the beginning of the school year, which we already presented earlier on in the school year. And one piece of it, if we were to ever work on developing school committee goals, would be alignment to that. And if you look over to where it says school improvement goals, in the fall, you had presentations by all of our schools for the school improvement goals. And I work with all the principals and the leadership team, and their goals will either align to the school improvement goals or my goals, which I shared with them, the draft with them, and the strategic plan. And then when we work with our educators and staff across the district, they also have their own evaluation plan that they're in. One thing they'll look at is if they want to, and it's up to them, your goals are up to the person who's presenting it, but to have, often there's alignment with their professional practice or the student learning goals that align directly to either their school improvement goals and the strategic plan. So mine works the same way. So what I'm going to do is just show you a little bit of that alignment and what, if you go to the next slide, Sam. From our presentation earlier in the year, I pulled out the 3 core areas from our strategic plan that we've chosen to focus on this year. And on the right, you'll see the 4 main goals that the district is working on. First, we have a goal around communication. Second, we have a goal related to multi-tiered systems of support, and also are reconnecting with students. A lot of work with post-pandemic recovery, even though I know we're still in the pandemic, but I like to keep saying post-pandemic, hoping that we're going to be out of it at some point. And then our focus on engagement with designing authentic learning experiences. And as you recall, you may have seen in the presentations from all of our principals so far this year, our focus has been kind of in the model of understanding our students, supporting our students, and engaging our students. So we go to the next slide. So all of us participate. It's really a continuous improvement cycle where we're on either a 1-year evaluation plan and cycle, or a 2-year for our staff that have been here a number of years, around 2-year cycles. It begins at the beginning of the year where you do a self-assessment. You do that for yourself. You do it with the rubric and you review where you think you would like to improve, areas that, you know, going, if I were doing it from last year, that I'd want to work on from last year, et cetera. And then you enter the phase where it's the analysis, goal setting, plan development, which is really where we're in now. In a typical year with me and the position and everything, we would have done this around the same time as the educators, a little bit after, around October-ish. And our goal we talked about at the subcommittee is to really have the superintendent goals be on an annual plan where it's presented at the beginning of the year after we go through all the other goals in the district, and the evaluations complete by the end of the year. In the past, we had done some of those evaluations in the fall, but we'd like it to clean it up so it's in one whole year, so that's our goal. And then you'll see a lot of the evidence along the way with our presentations. A lot of it, you're going to see alignment or references, but we also, in a typical year, you would do a mid-cycle review where you're talking about some of the progress you made, and then end of year you share some of your evidence, which I'll do with the subcommittee, and then that'll come out at the end of year evaluation. And then we start over and head into the next year again. We go to the next one. So I have 4 goals this year to present. I have 1 professional practice goal, 1 student learning goal, and 2 of our district improvement goals I take in and put in steps that I'm directly involved with. And we also, it still means we're still responsible for all the school improvement goals as well as the district goals, but these are areas that I'm working on. So the first is my professional practice goal. If you recall, all the way at the beginning of this year, I introduced you to my coach from the NISA program through MASS. So I'm in a very intensive new superintendent induction program that involves close to maybe about, I would say close to 10 to 12 hours a month. I have full day sessions with a cohort. I also meet weekly with my coach, and it's very much focused on leadership and strategy and my entry plan and a lot of the things I've talked about so far this year. Going back to last year, I was also part of the national organization, AASA, for the Aspiring Superintendent's Blended Learning Academy. That's coming to a conclusion next month, but I've had monthly sessions, and I also, that's a national cohort. It's been all online, but I have my conclusion to that in February, and I've also had a coach out of Pennsylvania that I've worked with just once a month. In addition, I've always been active with the MASC and MASS, and also with the WELL Network, which is for Women Educational Leadership Network, that a board that I'm on. We run some conferences. And so I added this year, which I wasn't part of before, I added the Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools. So again, today I had an hour-and-a-half workshop that was late this afternoon before our meeting tonight as one example. And that was it was really all about regional school districts. One last week was about Chapter 70 funding. And so I'm going to a number of these workshops, and that's a focus of my professional practice goal this year. For the next slide, for goal number 2, student learning goal, a lot of the work that we are focusing on across the district, but in particular with our implementation of iReady and STMath and rolling out the multi-tiered systems of support, is a focus on our iReady scores as a diagnostic and benchmark that will provide data that shows that academic growth that we've been focusing on. If you recall, last year I presented, that was the first year we used iReady as a diagnostic, and we didn't have any comparison data. And so now we will start to develop that comparison data. But most importantly, we can look at it from a district high level, which is what I have here. But my focus really is when we work with the principals, and I work with Dr. Kirkpatrick, and we go into the schools and we find out how we can better support grade level teams and classroom teachers when they're working individually with students. And yeah,
question.
Sure.
So by the end of the year, 75%, which sounds like a good goal. What are we today?
Yeah, so when I looked at the scores, I tried to have it so the bar was moving, and it's hard to pick Obviously, we want 100% that's going to be there in the green.
No, I'm not, the
but
75%,
yeah.
I'm not, my question is
It,
more about.
it was in the 60s, if I
Okay,
recall. I don't have the number right in front of me, but
yeah,
I tried to see where we were at last year for that first benchmark that we had and where we could be.
Okay.
But one thing, when we have they have the nice visual of the green, red, and the yellow, we want to get as much into the green, so the 75% at or above is that green area, and make
Great.
the yellow as small as we can. And we have our second round of iReady, so when you say how are we doing now, is actually happening now. We just opened it up this week, so we will know in February how we're doing mid-year, but we don't know yet because they haven't taken that test yet.
yeah, I was more,
Yeah.
for me, it was more about, from the measurement perspective, we're going from what to what.
Yeah,
So the fact
exactly.
we have that, that's
Yeah.
good. Okay, great.
And a piece of this too, there's a lot at work in the goal for key actions that support this behind the scenes. So a great example, not to keep bringing it up, but SD Math, the rollout SD Math, I'm seeing it in all of the classrooms. I was just at Memorial Elementary this morning, and it's amazing the growth and learning that I'm seeing with the students and the engagement that I'm seeing that we didn't have as much last year because it was we're still in the beginning stages of that. So I'm excited about that, and as well as we're starting to work on our DCAP. It's a year for revision for that. And I think once we're rolling out a new DCAP, that will assist as well. So if we go to the next one, goal number 3, pretty much we always have communications in some sort, either in our district goals or in the superintendent goals, because it's something we can always keep improving. There are some focus areas that at the beginning stages of my entry planning that I knew I wanted to put in place and I'm working on. So I have some images on the bottom there. On the left, you may see it when I send out a newsletter update. We're trying to have either through some more, every few weeks, a newsletter, some more that's from the district level. And we've also streamlined where it's coming on certain days from all of the schools this past year. And it's something that is, we upgraded so it's in other languages as well for our families that need that. So those are big changes. Another goal of mine is to really highlight teaching and learning and student updates. So I'm already proud to say that we have 2 amazing student reps right here who are adding a lot and asked a lot of questions last meeting, which was awesome. But also we're trying to put front and center our students from the various schools. So as other schools come forward, we'll still continue to have other student updates. So it's more well-rounded, and trying to put updates within our newsletter. There's still room for improvement with that, but that's one of our goals. We rolled out.
Can I ask a quick other question?
Sure.
Do we know, so this is a good one, so if I take a look at the email communication that goes with this, so for example, do we know the open rates, the through rates, things like that?
So that's the huge advantage of some more. You can see how many people open it up. So
And you
it's
can see how
been
many people click through into the actual.
into each little section. No, it
Yeah.
doesn't show that, but it says who's opened it up.
Okay.
Which, when we send emails out before, you don't know who's actually opening the emails. And so I would say it's been over 1,000 in the last few newsletters that I've had.
That's great.
Some more likes to give you, lots of feedback of how many more clicks you're getting, et cetera, when you send it out. Once it hits social media, we kind of send it out through our network, and then once we share it out on social media, that's where you start to see an uptick as well within our communications, which, yeah, no, go.
Is that, the 1,000, is that for the district wide or the individual, like cumulatively for all the individuals?
That was the district newsletter, so
Okay.
I don't know, we can find out what the school rates are as well, but I'm the one who has the some more newsletter, so I'll see the district one for that one.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see like what percentage of parents are reaching or that are actually
Yeah,
opening them
yeah.
and reading them.
And that's part of this. So in the evaluation of our communications, it's looking at the data and then asking for feedback and from our constituents as well and stakeholders to see, okay, what's working. And we know different things work for different people as well. And so with the social media aspect, we have the Facebook account. We kind of upgraded it from last year. And then one of the goals and strategic steps is to have an Instagram account as well, because we know we have a dipping population on Instagram. I understand that's where students are. Is that true? We're still on Instagram. It's hard to keep up, but I'm not making TikTok. I'm not making TikTok videos yet. But if that means how we get news out, I guess we could consider it. Maybe a school committee TikTok. But yeah, for snow days. And then the last one there is the Google form. So what I'm trying to do, instead of a large survey, I'm trying to have short survey questions forms embedded in the newsletter to get quick hits of feedback. And so I put one out for a website earlier in the year. I can put another one out. And then it just, honestly, what some of the suggestions were on the website, can you please have the calendar, like a link or a button right so I can get it, or the menu right there. So there's certain things, okay, you can still get it on the website, but I learned how to put buttons on the home page and added that in. So just those little things, you know, Eric, you've given some feedback on the app. That's helpful, just how we present. So there's always room for growth in that area. So that's going to be a big focus as we continue. And for the last one is related to, I would say, social emotional learning and equity. And by the end of the year, our system will be in place to help teachers reconnect with our students through SEL curriculum modules, PD, culturally responsive practices, and student SEL data. So what I put in there, I feel like we're it shows the alignment because a lot of the work I'm doing is working with the teams in the schools on all the same things they've already talked about. So we, as a leadership team, are focused on culturally responsive teaching in the brain. We'll come out with strategies we'll be able to share with the schools that will also go into our DCAP. We have the rollout of Thrively we've talked about, and Dave Quinn's talked about that a lot. We have some lessons that are going in place in addition to the assessment piece that's with that. Panorama, we've had our SEL survey again, and well-being. We'll follow up with an equity and diversity survey that they have in about a month or so that will help with our equity audit and kind of looking at the status of how things are right now and what areas for improvement. And so all of this, in all of my leadership team meetings, we follow up on and keep circling back to what our district goals are, which are aligned to my goals and the goals of the buildings. So if you go to the last page, I know it's all kind of squished in there, but what is helpful is you have a rubric for the superintendent's evaluation. And so what I did is from these specific goals, I just identified what I thought were the indicators and categories that aligned most to those goals. It doesn't mean that just because I have these 4 goals doesn't mean there aren't plenty of other areas that, especially new to the role, that I'm working on numerous areas that are related to the rubric and all that, but this at least helps to highlight that for you as well. So that's what I had for an overview. You have more of the details and benchmarks in there, but we had a good conversation last week, and we've already kind of hit the ground running anyways with a lot of these goals and steps so far this fall. Any questions? If not, we need to do a motion to approve the goals.
Okay, any other questions in regards to the goals? Is there Sean? I don't know if Carrie's on.
I'm here.
I didn't know if you had any questions.
Nope.
When are we starting the TikTok?
I heard that, as long as I don't have to dance.
Okay. Then could I get a motion to approve the?
Just one comment. We did have a lot of discussion about these goals in the subcommittee meeting as Maureen went over. I think we've got just as a matter of how this all is going to work. We're thinking of these goals as being achieved through the next time period, and then having the next evaluation time period be during the 2023 school year. And I hope that's correct, Maureen, if I've said that correctly.
Yes. Yep.
So a little bit different than we've had it in the past, and I thought that might be a worthwhile thing to go over.
The one piece that the group talked about was to focus on the goals, and as opposed to focusing on the rubric, since really we're kicking off this whole process this year, mid-year, and then doing goals at the whole part of the cycle to start the next year.
So if I understand you correctly, you're saying that you'll come back together at some point in the mid-fall of this year, this calendar year, which would be the 2023 school year, right?
No, we would just do the cycle this year, but only focus on goals. So for example, with the leadership team right now, we're focusing on the goals this year. So the evaluation will be based on just the goals. Next year, the evaluation will be based on the goals and all the additional evidence that you would do with a typical rubric.
Okay. So just so that I understand what you're saying, so we have a set of goals.
Mhm.
We're evaluating, the next evaluation will be based only on the goal.
Yep.
And then the evaluation after that will be based on the goals in the rubric.
Correct.
And the evaluation of just the goals will take place.
That would be at the end, great question, at the end of this year, as opposed to pushing it into the fall. And then that way it's aligned to the rest of our evaluation processes, which are just 1 year for all of our educators.
So like in June?
Yeah, end of May or June, one of those last meetings.
Yes, the idea was if we started the whole evaluation process this late in the year, it wouldn't really align with the year with the yearly timeframe that Maureen said she preferred, and I kind of agree with that timeframe, seeing as we're trying to evaluate ourselves on the school year as it's proceeding. So we wanted to line ourselves up for the correct timeframe, which would be fall to spring, instead of the evaluate in the late fall. You know what I'm saying? So we would essentially complete the evaluation in June of every year.
Excellent. All right, well then could I get a motion to approve the superintendent goals?
Motion to approve the superintendent goals.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Dr. Scully, aye.
Vicki Robinson,
Aye.
Bill Desotter, aye.
Harold Brown, aye.
John Nicholson, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
All right, then approved. Great.
So next up, I'm going to invite Leslie McGinnis, our school nurse leader and Nimbuck school nurse, to give a brief overview of some recent updates that just came out last week regarding new testing protocols. And before she speaks, I feel like I have to thank her every day for the amazing work that she does, especially this past, well, every week, but I mean, she's on speed dial with me, and I am with her as well. And Leslie, along with the nursing team, as you know, everything shifts every single week, and we're ready, okay, what's happening? And we jump in and we adjust and we attend all the webinars that are thrown upon us. We read all the guidance and create new forms, et cetera. So I just want to, before she dives into it, really thank her for all her hard work.
Thanks, Maureen. We appreciate it on behalf of the nurses. Thank you as well. The protocols do change frequently and quickly, and the rollout is quick as well. So this is a presentation that Maureen and I attended on Wednesday that DESE put forward. So these are their slides. It's a shortened version of their presentation that they did for us. And they were going to provide an FAQ and updated flow charts. But I reached out to DESE today to see if they'd be available for this evening. They said they had over 600 questions from the webinar on Wednesday. So they're still compiling answers, which led them to provide another webinar this Wednesday before they provide those FAQs and flow charts for us. So hopefully the guidance itself isn't changing, just some of the questions that came up from the first webinar will be addressed. So, and if you can go through. So this was just their review of statewide testing data and programs in schools. And so from DESE last fall, they initiated test and stay to keep close contacts in school, which our district has adopted. We started out with symptomatic testing last school year with the pandemic and adopted test and stay this year. We had the ability to do pool testing, but didn't feel we needed to to undertake that this year, and unless the numbers showed that we did. And we continue with symptomatic testing and test and stay. DESE recognized how much work it was and strain on the school health staff. And then 4.5 months later, with hundreds of thousands of results from across the state, it showed that more than 98% of the tests from test and stay have been negative. So that means 98% of the tests done at school for kids that are they're in test and stay because they are a close contact in the school setting that wasn't exempt from testing and quarantine. So they participated in test and stay. And the same with our students in our district. So 98% of those tests were negative. Thanks, Sam. DESE looked at the nationwide data. They looked at studies from California and Illinois and the CDC, and found that the test and stay in those states, so we're talking significantly larger school districts with possibly less resources than our district, and the transmission rate of in-school transmission was only 0.7 to 1.5%, so significantly on the lower side. And test positivity rates and test and stay indicate that students identified as close contacts in school are very unlikely to contract or spread COVID-19 in the school setting. They looked at other states. Connecticut and Vermont have recently transitioned from individualized contact tracing to the use of at-home testing and focusing school health efforts on symptomatic testing. So they rolled out their new COVID testing options in a memo that came out on January 18th, and then the webinar the next day. So districts and schools that are participating in symptomatic testing and or pool testing may choose to continue with these new testing strategies and discontinue contact tracing and test and stay. So because our district has been participating all along in symptomatic testing, we're eligible to enroll in this program. We can use our professional discretion in the school district if we feel that contact tracing is necessary for a particular classroom or event, a team or an after-school event where we think that possibly there's some transmission going on. We certainly can evaluate that and do contact tracing. We're not prohibited from doing it by jumping into this new or adopting this new testing program. For districts that are opting to make, electing to make this change, will be provided with rapid antigen at-home tests for all participating students and staff that can be used on a weekly basis. So DESE has indicated that both of these options will remain in place from January 31st until April 22nd. At that time, they'll determine if they're needed to continue beyond April 22nd. They'll certainly look at the reporting on these results. They'll look at the individual positivity rates in the communities and across the state, and then also look at what's going on across the country, and then determine whether we'll continue with this till the end of the school year. So this is information about the at-home antigen tests that they're providing. So schools that can elect to switch to the updated testing program could elect to by between January 21st and April 1st. So it's a rolling election. You can, if you don't think you're ready to opt in right away, we wanted to opt in right away. We needed to respond by January 21st to begin receiving tests for staff this week. And so Maureen did complete the opt-in form for our district last week. And we have sent out in her weekly memo to staff, and what you've seen is the staff letter, which includes the opt-in form, just a couple of quick questions for staff to opt in, an explanation, which includes a video on how to do the test at home, an infographic on how to do the test at home, and then a positive test result reporting form. Only positive tests need to be reported for either students or staff, and then those numbers will be reported back to DESE. We no longer have to report to the state or report those at the state level. Let's see, staff members who choose to participate, and all students and parents, guardians who sign their children up will complete a brief opt-in form. And schools and districts will distribute at-home test all participating students and staff regardless of vaccination status. So it's an optional opt-in program. It doesn't matter whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated, you can participate, but it's not required on either the staff or the student level to participate. The test kits will be shipped directly to central office, was the indication that Maureen had put, for internal distribution. And they're packaged in 2 tests per kit, which means it's a 2-week supply. They want you to test once a week. It's a version of doing serial or pool testing. So people are testing at home. It's not looking for, if someone's symptomatic, they're going to test outside of that date, or if it coincides, they could use one of these tests. But it's looking for somebody that might be asymptomatic or just at the beginning stages of having COVID, and it picks up a positive result before somebody has symptoms. That way that person can stay home and self-isolate until their symptoms are gone. And iHealth is the test that's being used. There's a link in the letter for students and for parents about the iHealth test itself. Again, it's 1 kit every 2 weeks, so they can test themselves weekly. We looked at determining what would be the best days to recommend. Again, it's not required, but it would be recommended that staff test on Sunday. If staff test positive, they would notify their sub-call-in, as they typically do if they're going to be out, complete the positive test results notification form, which would come to the school nurses, and then we'll follow up with the staff member when their 5 days are over, depending on whether they had symptoms before they tested positive. We're going to ask, at this time, we're going to look at having students test on Thursday, once a week on Thursday. And again, parents and staff would only report results that are positive. Negative results do not need to be reported. Again, they'll be asked if they test positive to inform their school on the positive result, and the form is linked in the letter. And schools, again, are not required to report these results to the Department of Public Health, but we will continue to report these positive results to DESE when you report on Wednesday, is it?
Yep, Wednesday by 5.
And the update to quarantine guidelines. So districts and schools that select to opt into this new testing program will discontinue individualized contact tracing. So for these districts, or for us, there'll be no longer be the expectation that close contacts will be identified, and therefore any potential in-school contacts do not need to quarantine. Instead, schools should shift their focus to monitoring symptomatic individuals. And we are always advocating for people to self-monitor, for students and staff. Everybody should be self-monitoring for COVID symptoms. Everybody knows what they are at this point, and if you recognize you have COVID symptoms, then you should stay home. If you're in school when they begin, go to the school nurse for symptomatic testing. DESE and Department of Public Health will update the protocols for responding to the scenarios, COVID-19 scenarios, and the guidance will reflect the changes to the testing program. And they'll also provide school districts with an FAQ on the new testing program. Any questions from the committee?
So what will the process for if somebody tests positive change?
You mean if they test positive on one of the at-home tests?
Yeah.
No, it would be similar to when we come in the morning, parents notify us by email, or parents and staff by email or by phone call. They call in and say, so now they can complete the form. So if they're doing the test if it's staff on a Sunday, if it's parents on a Thursday, they would complete the positive result notification. We added a piece to it that DESE didn't have on the form to determine, what's the date of the positive test, what's the date of the onset of symptoms, if applicable. And then that typically would be just as if a parent calls in and leaves a message in the morning or sends an email, the school nurse follows up with that parent to determine the date of onset of symptoms or positive test, whichever occurred first, the end of the 5-day isolation, and as long as there's symptom resolution when that student or staff person can return to school. So it doesn't really change that process at all. And the isolation protocols have not changed since they were updated December 30th.
And what about as well for if somebody appears to be symptomatic but tests negative?
So we look at that in a couple of different ways. If somebody is symptomatic, the symptoms for the Omicron variant right now are relatively similar, student, person to person to person. And we also have noticed as well that people are testing negative one day, the next day, and then on day 3, they test positive. So if someone has symptoms and they come to the health office and they test and the test is negative, but they're symptomatic, they're typically sent home and they can return with symptom resolution. Typically, somebody's symptoms aren't going to resolve if it's COVID in the next day, so we recommend that the parents have their students tested again, because we have seen 1, 2, sometimes 3 negative tests followed by a positive test. It just wasn't enough to pick up on that test at that particular time.
So Leslie, when let's say a person tests positive in their first day of symptoms, they have to isolate for 5 days still, is that correct?
Yes, but depending on which comes first. If those occur on the same day, Sean, then it would be 5 days from that day, but lots of times student symptoms will start, and as I mentioned, they don't test positive right away, but the isolation time frame is from the onset of symptoms or the positive test, whichever comes first. So if the symptoms started Saturday, but they tested positive in our office today, the Saturday is day 0, we'll count forward 5 days from Saturday. Day 6 would be Friday, and they could return to school on Friday as long as there's full symptom resolution, no fever in the prior 24 hours.
Now, would they be part of the testing cycle when they return to school?
No, we won't be doing test and stay anymore. We'll just be doing symptomatic testing. So typically if somebody had their COVID symptoms returned if they improved and then their COVID symptoms returned, we would probably send them back home. They would not need to be tested again. Dr. Madoff from the Department of Public Health said they are noting some. So typically they had said you would have 90 days after you had COVID where you sort of were exempt from testing and quarantine protocols. You had enough antibodies that you wouldn't have COVID again, but they have seen a couple of some breakthrough or some additional cases. So if somebody has COVID in December, and I think he was speaking specifically about Omicron, but had Omicron in December, and then you would think they would be okay through March, but maybe in February they had symptoms again that looked like COVID, we would test it. Their recommendation would be to test again at that time.
Okay.
But no, don't do any, no one is required to test. Once they have COVID, they're not required to test negative before they can return to school. It's not recommended by DESE or Department of Public Health, just symptom resolution.
So that threshold for when people might get it a second time, would you think it's about, is it 90 days or is it 2 weeks or is it 3 weeks, or what is that threshold for when they can start testing again?
Typically it's after 90 days.
Okay, 90 days.
So,
all right.
Yes, typically somebody has 90 days of, there are 4 exemptions for testing and quarantine, and one of them is COVID in the last 90 days. So if you've had COVID, then you're exempt from testing and quarantine, unless there hasn't been any specific guidance yet about what that time frame might look like if somebody's exposed and shows COVID symptoms again. We haven't seen anybody have COVID within 90 days after having it. And I don't think there was a lot of data. He didn't give any specific information on that. So right now, if you've had COVID, you're exempt from testing and quarantine for 90 days.
Thank you so much to the nursing department and yourself, Leslie. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Other questions? All right.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Appreciate it.
very much.
You're
I know
welcome.
it's an amazing, it's a lot of work these days.
Thank you.
All right, so now I'm going to invite Dr. Cheryl Kirkpatrick, our interim assistant superintendent, up. She's going to provide some info regarding a grant award and also some PD updates.
Great, thanks. I'm happy to be here tonight to share with you that we were recently awarded a grant from the Department of Education for acceleration academies in math for Mendon-Upton. The academies will provide services to kids who have been affected the most by the COVID-19 pandemic and are really targeted to those who could benefit from extra supports, specifically during February vacation and April vacation. And so the way the grant works, it's designed as a program that is meant to provide students with the ability to focus in on targeted curriculum that will address their specific needs. And so we will be, first of all, identifying students for the program based on a whole host of data that you've heard lots about in terms of our ability to get with their MCAS results, the iReady data that we'll have coming, and the growth data that will be coming very shortly once the second administration of iReady happens. And then also the panorama data that talks about SEL, the social emotional learning for students. And we can triangulate that with attendance data as well. So we'll be using that to identify students for the program, and then also using some of the same data to be able to target the curriculum for the program, as the program is meant to be a really focused deep dive into some of the specific areas that these kids could benefit from the extra supports. And the other really cool thing about this program is that it's really targeted to be able to provide students with small in-person instruction through highly qualified teachers. And to do that, the grant intentionally encourages districts to offer generous stipends to teachers to provide these supports and to generate their own curriculum that's targeted for these students. So we'll be posting for staff for these academies at the end of this week. And we've got a whole group that's already been consulting together and is really excited about the opportunity to provide students with these supports. In total, we're probably looking at providing supports to about 240 students across the district between February and April vacations.
Didn't you say how much it was?
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah, sure.
It's $102,000. So.
Wow.
162, don't forget to say
Yeah,
162.
that's right. Yeah.
No, it's
It's
great.
a very unique number. Yeah.
So will this cover all grade levels or only certain grade levels?
It's
or?
targeted for grades 3 through 10.
Okay.
And we worked in consultation pretty quickly because the RFP came out quickly and we knew that we had to turn this around and, if awarded the grant, which we just learned about last week, turn the program around pretty rapidly. So I think it was very thoughtfully constructed with teachers and administrators to basically, what we decided is that we'd roll out a smaller program in February because we knew that we had a smaller turnaround for it, and that program would focus on high school and middle school students, and that we'd roll out the whole program that would include 3rd and 4th graders for the April vacation.
Wow.
Yeah, so I'll look forward to reporting back, and we'll keep track of all the students that are involved in that because that's part of our reporting requirements as well. So the other thing that I wanted to update you all on is the professional development. We had a great PD session on January 14th. It was, and just, to mention, I think these half-day PD sessions are really kind of hitting the mark in terms of being able to help staff experience learning in a smaller dose at the end of the day, and the way that's been structured right at the end of a week too. We had sessions at each of the building that continued specific focus that's been earmarked for the buildings. At the elementary level, we offered a curriculum support that focused on both Bridges and Panorama. And the Panorama session, the Bridges was a continuation of what we had done in December, so it really is going to help the classroom teachers to be able to develop their math curriculum instruction. And the Panorama was something that is something that's reasonably new, but we have the data now from the fall administration of Panorama, and it's really amazing. And so Panorama was able to work with some student support providers and specialists to be able to look at that data and be able to talk about trends that we're seeing building wide. The platform itself allows staff to drill down to the student level, which I think will be really helpful as well. So we'll look forward to continued sessions with that. But we did sessions both at the elementary level and the high school level with Panorama. And then at the middle school level, we had a behavioral supports program that focused on providing, helping classroom teachers think about ways that they could address and support students' behavioral needs in the Tier 1 classroom. And that program was brought in by Jen D'Angelo, and through a partnership with Applied Behavioral, the Applied Behavioral Institute, and everyone in the middle school participated in that session, so that was great. And then at the high school, we also had another session on that was really focused on supporting students, so that was the theme for the high school. In conjunction with Panorama, we also had a session on signs of suicide, which was a really important program that the staff at Nimbuck actually provided to their peers. So.
Great review.
Any questions?
Actually,
No, it's very good.
Sorry, I had a quick question about the grant, actually.
Yeah.
So do students have to be selected by the district, or can they enroll themselves, for students and parents?
That's a really good question. So the grant is targeted to provide students who've been most impacted by COVID with the extra supports that they might need to bring their math up to standards.
Okay.
And so the reason why the district will go through a process of selecting is because we want to be able to take that into consideration and provide those supports to the kids who need it most.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay.
That's all I have. Thank you.
So then maybe we'll quickly move to school subcommittee updates. I think really the first one's on the budget side, where I'll just say that we have a budget subcommittee meeting on Monday of next week. So next piece there, and then policy, do you want to talk to that or?
We have a policy subcommittee meeting scheduled for February 7th.
Thank you.
So we'll move on to new business. First new business is the review of the district calendar for 2022-23 school year.
So one thing we'd like to do is we usually bring the calendar for the school committee to take a look at and then vote on. We're just doing a review tonight, so you can have it in front of you. We tried to get it as close as we could, and we had a few outstanding. We still have a meeting coming up with the Teachers Association where we'll go through and talk about some PD dates and all that. But wanted to put it in front of you as soon as we could, and then we'll get ongoing feedback, and then hopefully have that final version for February 7th. A few things that might look a little bit different. According to the contract, we have one more half-day PD day. And so that's been part of the discussion. What is the best point in the year to do that? As of today, bringing it forward, we have it on the November 8th date to maybe potentially help alleviate election day congestion. Yep.
Election, I think, is November 1. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
It doesn't fully alleviate it. The only thing that you may want to consider is the fact that we have the open houses that week. And so that would be 3 half days in a row. So from a community parent perspective, just think about that. And there's no decision now, so we can
Back
get
to no
feedback.
school November.
Yeah. So, well, we do like to concentrate it in a week. So at least it's one, not a disruption every week. So there are pros and cons to that decision. One pro in having it is it allows for some continuity of PD at the beginning of the year. So we have the October date, and then it would allow for November. If we ended up not going with that date, and we'll get some more feedback, then we could look at later on in the year, but then we have some of the issues on the election day. We added in Juneteenth holiday in the calendar. I shifted the school committee meeting off of September 26th. I had been in this pattern because it's Rosh Hashanah, and we didn't put it on October 31st. So something just to take a look at that schedule. If we do that, it means there's only one school committee meeting in September. So it's whether or not, if you're okay with one meeting, not to say we could always add a meeting on a different week. We can always add a meeting on a Tuesday or a different day. But to start, just we tried to check some of the holidays as well. And March 17th is an aligned day for PD for our Blackstone Valley Consortium and some LSDO, where we like to, with that organization, we'd like to have PD where we can share. And that's the same thing for the October 7th date is also a BDCC date for PD as well. So a lot of considerations that we put into place. We still have a lot of eyes on it, but if you have any questions, you can forward them my way, and we can try to bring forward a final calendar for your review for that February 7th to vote on.
Can I ask a question? So why are we going with these sort of both Columbus and Indigenous Peoples Day? Why not just move to
Indigenous Peoples Day, as a number of districts across the state have done and are continuing to do?
We can do that.
I mean,
That's it. It's up to
throwing it
you.
out there for, like, want to discuss it, or?
I'm not really up to date on the other districts are doing in that regard for that specific.
They are, I would agree.
Okay. Because you guys are doing it in your district, you've done it in your district in Somerville, where you are? I don't know what Dover.
I would say a lot of districts have either shifted to calling it Indigenous Peoples Day.
Yeah.
So I put both in here. It used to just say Columbus Day, but last year is when they are going to get a shift as well. And some school committees are choosing to just make the shift just to Indigenous Peoples Day. So it's your choice.
I'm fine.
I could care less, I mean, I don't know.
That sounds fine to me. What do we do, Carrie, what's happening in Dover, Sherborne these days?
We've shifted to Indigenous Peoples Day.
That sounds great then, we'll call it Indigenous Peoples Day. Make that up.
Yep.
I have my one general question that I continue to ask every year. We have no other religious holidays, why do we have Good Friday?
That's a good question.
I continue to ask.
And all I do is put the calendar together based off of last year, but I would tend to agree with you that it's worth a conversation, that if you want to single out one holiday over other holidays.
I'm okay
Or
having
not.
early release on the 14th. I just don't think it's necessarily a reflection of Good Friday.
Yeah.
I think it's early release as we head into the April vacation or
I've worked
ED
in,
day
I've
or-
worked,
It's not always the Friday before April vacation.
it isn't always. I have worked in districts where it was, we had it where if you had to take it off, you put in, you take it off. It does become a concern from attendants, how many do that? We would get subs for those that, requested it, just like we do for any other holidays that, for other religions as well when they request it. But it's really, it's up to you. I've seen it both ways. And myself would be absolutely comfortable with either approach.
Well, current plan is that would be a half day anyways. I'm not saying to change it from a half day, I'm just saying.
So right now,
Just
so
say early release.
we
Early
moved
release.
it
Yeah,
from
I
that,
agree with you.
moved it to that half day.
That's all.
And I think part of that argument was that for those that were celebrating that holiday, it generally would start, services would take place usually in that afternoon. And also if people were leaving, if they had students or faculty, that students would be in school, and then they wouldn't be there that whole day or leaving early.
I understand what you're saying.
Up to you. Your calendar.
Something for us to think about
You
before
got
we
it.
finalize on it. You said, your point, this is the initial draft.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you brought up the 2 points that I was gonna bring up.
Graduation is on a
Good.
Saturday on this calendar as well, which is the
Yes.
reflection, I think, of how things are moving forward. Great.
All right. Thank you.
All right. The next item is the Nimbuck field trip request. Hello there.
You might remember me from another field trip proposal for junior prom. Thanks for that one, they're very excited. So get ready for another great performance from Miss Ayers. So I was looking into running a trip in February of 2023, focused on science, specifically biology, conservation, and sustainability. The trip would be 8 days over February break of 2023. There is a risk of up to 1 school day being missed. The goal from the tour company is to miss no school days, but we have to agree to have, based on flight availability, prices, that it could run into the Monday after, or we leave the Friday before. That would be the issue. The trip is in, I'm sorry, I don't think I said it, to Belize. Sorry, I have the presentation up. The main issue that I know parents are gonna have is going to be safety. What's their COVID protocols, cancellations, all of that. So I've been working with Iep Tours. I worked with them in the previous district I was in. Did go on a training tour, was very impressed about how they handled the start of the pandemic, actually. So what they're offering students now is a 100% money back guarantee up until May of this year. They don't even have to have a reason. They can just say, just kidding, I don't like how this is going. I don't have to give you a reason, just give me your money back. And then they're also offering just COVID liability protection is going to be built right into the price. Let's see. So what this trip is actually going to look like. I have the presentation, which sorry guys, did not, kind of forgot I wouldn't be able to present.
We're gonna get quickly thrown up. That would be helpful.
That might, I'm sorry, Sam. I didn't-
Sorry, no, that,
I will send that right to you. It's a document that might give you a little bit more of a visual,
That'd be great.
oh, yeah. Oh, Sam always comes in to save the day. Sure. Oh, no, this is great. Thank you. I just showing my lack of tech savviness while I'm trying to convince people to let me take kids to a foreign country. Well, here we go. All right. Okay, I deflect with humor. This is good. Okay. I hope I said the right San Marino. That's the wrong name. While that's going, I'll give you a little bit of updates what's not on the document. I've organized with the department head of the science department as well as Mrs. Cook to be chaperones 1 and 2 after me. Just so we have that already set out so parents know who's going to be going with their kids, what their expertise is in, all of that. Beautiful. So this is the proposal that was written, co-written with me and the tour company. So if you want to scroll down just one piece of paper. Oh, that's so tiny. Oh, you're amazing. So first, Iep Tours is a company that's over 55 years old. It is the first and longest continuously operating company. I did work with them when I was in Franklin. We set up a trip for over 45 students. It was ready to go. And then it was set for June of 2020, so you can imagine how that turned out. So that trip did go well, but I am now lucky to be here. So that went off without me. I've been thinking about that throughout the pandemic. I'm about doing it again. I had more an interest in a STEM tour. I do teach chemistry and ecology here. And this trip gives a little bit of a different spin on what is already offered to students. Right now, the students have access to language tours and general traveling tours for culture and history. This tour focuses specifically on, I'll read a little bit of the itinerary. They're gonna go on ethnobotanical walk along trails through a jungle, learn about soil building processes and captive animal husbandry, experiment with watershed quality assessment. They can actually go through, that's a different doc, Sam, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
I'm in my own special little presentation for me. We'll visit a local NGO, talk about a little bit of the history behind NGOs versus government organizations, because the government in Belize is very different than here, and they have a different stance on environmental protection than the US, which I think will be valuable for students. We'll visit a sustainable farm, and they can actually work on a little bit of my passion, the genetics behind like what's a GMO, what does that actually mean? Because students I think really struggle with that distinction. And then a lot of just cultural things, making tortillas, stuff that is offered in other trips. But the really big focus is going to be connecting STEM, specifically in this biology, ecology, and chemistry, with what they're doing at Nimbuck and what they're doing, hopefully, in life. And something I'm really excited about this trip, so if you flip down to page 7. I guess it got one more. Beautiful. The students and staff who accompany us actually have the opportunity to get college credits and high school credits. This is an accredited academic institution, which I think is something that's very, very exciting. A lot of my students in Franklin did sign up for this option when we were setting up. So what they do is I could manage for them an independent project where they use what they're learning on this trip, bring it back to Nimbuck, and connect it to something here, and they can actually apply for pretty inexpensive college credits. I think they have the prices here. Graduate credits, no, that's educators. Where's our, up a little bit.
No, right there, oh, right there, 9 to 12.
Oh, 9 through 12, 3 undergraduate credits. It's $215 for 3 credits, which is, I think my undergraduate credit at a state school was probably about $500 per credit, and I went to UMass. So it's an awesome experience for students to get that rigor of an academic challenge while away. I think that's one of the reasons why I picked EF. And then the price for this trip, if you want to scroll down a little, up, I'm sorry, Sam. Jeez, I'm using Sam. So how this works is there's 4 different options. They can do the automatic payment plans, donation pages, Global Citizens Scholarship Fund. We actually did have 2 students win that in Franklin out of our 45. They put in an application, it's open to all, mostly need-based, and then risk-free enrollment period. If they enroll by April, they have a month to decide, just kidding, I don't even want to do it anymore. They don't need a reason whatsoever. Beyond that, there is the built-in trip insurance that I'm requiring, just because I saw the nightmare that happened when we left it to students' decision. It's $100-something, and that way they can say, oh, I'm sick, grandma's sick, anything like that, I'm out. And that's built in right to the cost. The cost for the 8-day trip, including the airfare, hotel, transportation, a 1-to-1 guide, all the emergency care, everything, is around $4,000. I think I have that up right above. Where is it? I've read this 170 times, I swear. I don't know. Oh, 8. Right there, up 1. So that's the student price. They do get a discount if they have a speedy enrollment. Obviously, that's not something I'd want to pressure on students, so we'd have to assume that that would be the cost, including the insurance, global travel protection, all of that. It also covers medical insurance for students, which is very helpful, so we don't need to collect that information or ensure that we have insured students. And I think the last thing I'd want to really put forward is their emergency care safety. This is something that really impressed me about this organization in particular. We have global offices, one right in Belize. We have a one-to-one guide. We have an emergency number that's given to every student. It's pretty helpful. From anything from, oh my gosh, I got left at the train station, to there's an injury. Anything could happen. We have to kind of roll. We have to be prepared for that, but also be comfortable and confident knowing that from anything from a little thing to the worst thing happens, not only they have our back, but we know how to get in contact with every single person on the command team. It's one chaperone per 6 students, which I feel is a pretty comfortable ratio. And that's kind of my very wordy way of explaining my goal for this trip. I think questions would be really important. Concerns, comments?
Do you have an idea right now about how many students are interested in this trip?
I'm not allowed, I didn't think I was allowed to advertise, period, until I got your approval.
We don't know.
We wouldn't run the trip no matter what unless there's enough students for 2 chaperones. I would never, ever take them alone. So that means 12 students would be the minimum. If it was under 12, it would just not work. The next chaperone on our list is actually Jen Field. She's a science department head. She was in the Peace Corps, ton of experience with that. I myself have traveled all over. I've been here before. Shelley also would be, if we get 18 students, she would come, and then we have a kind of descending list of people who have staff who've shown interest, but I've not mentioned the word. I have Dia in my class. She doesn't know anything about this.
No, that's okay.
It's been a secret. What?
So inside the news with you now.
I tried to, because I didn't want to be like, yeah, we're gonna do this thing, and they'd be like, yeah, let's go, and then they were like, just kidding. They said no. I don't like disappointing the kids. That's why I was very insistent on the prom. If you said no, I was gonna have to quit my job. So this one I didn't tell them, so it's a little bit easier to back out of. So.
Understood. Thank you.
Less pressure.
So would this be open to current freshmen through juniors then?
Yes. I was thinking we could open it to 8th grade because this would be a high school trip.
Right.
It'd be a little harder in advertising, but realistically, I want current freshmen through seniors going.
Right.
So we could open it up to 8th grade at MISCO.
Yeah.
If that's something that would be interested in, especially if it's siblings or just family, you know. Nothing younger than that, though. I'd be most comfortable at least being able to see the students day to day before we head off on this trip.
I had a question too. So you mentioned these projects that you can earn credit for. What would those look like?
So this specific trip we have to curate. I know when I did it in Franklin, what we did was we found a course at SNHU, one of the partner universities, and it really is student driven, or it can come from me leading it. I'd want to wait and see a little bit longer to see how many students we get, because we want to do paired projects, you know, like hands-on with friends. But there's some really cool opportunities. I can get student-specific information for that. I know because the Franklin trip was very different. It was longer, it was Germany and Switzerland, but some of the projects that they were looking at were glacial ice retreat in the Alps. It's like, hey, we're gonna run this tour, let's talk to 3 locals, write a report on what's the ecological impact. So for this one, it's more waterways based, watershed, ecological impact of climate change. Related to soil health, ecological, biodiversity. So it'd be definitely more bio-shifted. So those credits are going to be a global travel credit, like there's a specific term for it I can get for you. But it is from an accredited university, and students have been successful transferring it as a gen ed.
I see. Okay.
So it'd be a gen ed. It would not be a bio 101. It would be a general education, which is helpful, like an AP class.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. So now, if there are no further question, we just need to take a vote. Did I get a motion to remove the believes, stem, yet not field tree?
Well said. Second?
Second.
All right, roll call vote.
Linda Skelly, aye.
Vicky Leverage, aye.
Bill Desotter, aye.
Eric Brown, aye.
John Nicholson, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
Well, there it is. It's passed. You can now advertise it.
I thought I was gonna have to answer lots more questions.
All right, it's good.
We'll share pictures. It'll be great.
That would be wonderful. We're looking forward.
Thank you.
All right, next up.
Now we have Jen D'Angelo, our Director of Student Support Services, is going to provide the departmental presentation on budget.
This is a super exciting presentation compared to yours. So thank you for having me tonight. Okay, perfect. Oh, that's it. So first, we're going to just start off with a quote that we use in the department, talking about inclusive education and what it means to us, and that's about valuing student differences and supporting their learning needs in different capacities. Thanks, Sam. So we'll start with just an overview of the department. So currently, there's one administrator, and that is me. And then instructional staff is listed up there. So we have special education teachers, speech language pathologists, OTs, PTs, psychologists, specialists, certified BCBAs, and team chairperson. So of these positions, we have 8 who are contracted service providers who work in our district either on a part-time or full-time basis. And instructional aides that provide support in a variety of areas across the district, both in small group classes, specialized programming, and in our inclusive classes. As you look, oh, nothing yet, sorry. That's okay. So if you look on here, we have 3 psychologists listed. Over the course of the last couple of years, we've been able to add 2 full-time school psychologists. Prior to me entering the district, our school psychologists were all contracted service providers. So we've been fortunate to kind of reallocate some funding, moving money from our contracted service line into our operating expense to hire 2 full-time school psychologists. We have one who currently serves our elementary level, and this year we were fortunate to add a second one who's working in our middle school and high school level. We also do have one contracted school psychologist who provides about 20 to 25 hours of work a week, helping in mostly at the middle school and high school level around 3-year evaluations, risk assessments, and outside evaluations. The other added here is our BCBA. So this year we were also able to allocate some money, reallocate from our contracted services over to our operating, and we were able to move from 2 part-time contracted BCBAs to 1 full-time in-district BCBA, and we still have the contracted BCBA that helps out. Thanks, Sam. Second slide is just an overview of the type of our continuum of services in the district. So we go from least restrictive to most restrictive. Our full and partial inclusion or skill-based instruction that happens within the general ed classroom. This is what some people refer to as co-teaching or inclusion support. Our small group specialized instruction is skill-based instruction outside of our general education classes. Those are our small group special ed courses. At MISCO, it's in math and ELA. And then we have our substantially separate programs. So these are programs that have modified curriculums for students, and they're very individualized. So the students that are in our specialized programs have individualized services and modified content that focuses around functional academics, daily living skills, and some vocational education. And then we have students who in day programs who cannot meet their needs in district, so they go to day programs. And then we have our most restrictive is our residential programs, and we have a handful of students who are in residential programs. So here we have some highlights. So I just added a couple of highlights on here to talk about. One I've already talked about was the addition of our 2 school psychologists and our addition of a 1 PCBA. We also were able to update the pre-K curriculum. We did a group with our 2 pre-K teachers and our pre-K coordinator, and we reviewed 2 to 3 different curriculums. And we decided to go along with World of Wonders, which aligns with our K-4 curriculum. So that was implemented in September, and they continue to work on implementing those strategies and using the new resources and materials. We also have done a heightened focus on parent partnerships this year. So we had some engagement opportunities in the fall that happened at all the buildings, and we also are in the process of doing workshops. We have contracted with a couple of different agencies to come in to provide some parent trainings, and also some of our local agencies like MURSD and DDS, our state agencies, to help provide an additional layer of resources to our families. Another opportunity that we're really focusing on too is through our team process, our Iep teams. We are looking at providing opportunities for families looking for in-home or center-based services around behavioral support and DDA instruction, and also providing connections to mental health professionals in the area. This has been a strain in most districts across the state, trying to find licensed, available therapists, day placements, any of those sorts of things. So we have been collaborating with some local agencies to put that resource into families as well. Oh, I skipped the last one, sorry. You guys are quick. That's okay. Can you go back?
Yes.
There you go, thanks. And then the last one is our return to school services. So this was an established program at MISCO. They refer to it as the Bridge program. And what that is it's for students who have significant absences when they're returning to school. So embedded in the program is a clinical focus and an academic focus. It's really individualized. So some students will come into the program and use the support for a week, a few days. Other students may be in there for a couple of weeks. So we've used this program at the middle school for a couple of years. Last year, along with the high school administrators and the support staff in the counseling center, we did a baseline survey and we collected initial data. We did a program description and we rolled out that return to services at the high school this year. So that's a new support at the high school this year, and MISCO continues to provide that support to our students.
How is the parent partnerships engagement going? I mean, obviously with the start of COVID, it kind of like shut that down completely. How have you been working to build that back up? I'm just wondering how.
Yeah, so we didn't have much participation. So in the fall, what we did is we did building-based casual conversations. We had a great turnout at the high school, and then the middle school and the 2 elementaries, not so much. So that was not as successful as I would have liked to see it. We did a couple of online information sessions with MRC. Those also didn't have a great turnout. We had a basic rights presentation that was hosted in collaboration with the Federation, and we had about 5 families that attended that. So, you know, I think it was just kind of getting people used to having some options. Yep. So we did send out a second flyer in January listing all of the opportunities from now till the end of the year. So we did have, it was Tuesday, last Tuesday we had a behavior workshop, and I had 8 families, so that was good. So I do think that we're on the rise with parent involvement. We've been utilizing the remind system as well to go out. We've been sending out notifications either the night before or morning of to remind families. The calendar of giving it out early was really just so people could kind of have it on their radar. I know schedules are tight. I know there's a lot of activities. I know our families have multiple children in the system. So that was a way for them to kind of forecast, put it on their calendars, and then the reminders are there just to say, hey, remember we have that coming up. So we've also done some work too with families through the IEP process who we've engaged in conversations with who may be needing some of these services, making some direct invitations and recommendations for those as well to really kind of hone in on the supports that we have provided. So we have a lot going on this year. We've invested, you'll see later on, a lot of grant money in these opportunities to create some extra resources for our families to help facilitate that partnership.
So I don't know how feasible it would be for some of these parent workshops to be like recorded and made available, or like if parents, people can't, like, you know, I don't know if that's a barrier, but just throwing it out there, like, you know, I think particularly if people have young kids and it's hard for them to get away.
Yep.
Might be something that maybe
But I think the repeatability is reinforcing it. And to your point, you're kind of getting people back in the habits after, you know, a year and a half or so, of like really truly kind of being out.
Right.
You know, I think your point is, you know, in the beginning, you're not gonna have a lot of engagement, but it's not kind of one and done, you kind of gotta do it over. So I think that repeatability that you're doing is the right thing.
And I do think we've seen an increase, and so that's,
Yeah.
you know, that's helpful. I know we do have some families who reached out to say, can some of the things be virtual? Some of our presenters prefer that in person. So some of those behavioral workshops that we have coming up, we did one, like I said, we had one that was abroad, and now we're doing some smaller group ones, one focused on our elementary and pre-K, one focused on middle school and high school. They really do, the presenters really do like the in-person because of the content that they're providing. So that's, you know, we do have some limitations with that, but I'm happy to look at ways that we can, you know, either record or expand out as much as possible. So I think that's helpful. Thank you. Thanks. So our next couple slides are talking about our grants. So we do get funding every year from the state that's pretty regularly, but then we also have these entitlement grants that we can apply for and secure some additional funding. So last year, these were the three that we were able to get. They're both targeted sped improvement grants. These were really focused on helping districts recover from the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. So we received two. We received one for about $15,000 and another one for the $1,800. The $1,500 was geared towards special education in the upper grades, and that's where we looked at our program review, increasing our assessment ability, bringing in some contracted services to offset some of the services that may not have happened as well as they would have with the remote learning, and then looking at some additional supplies, wireless keyboards, adaptability kind of things for some of our kids who struggle with dexterity and fine motor. And then our early childhood targeted sped grant was what we used to partially fund our pre-K curriculum, the World of Wonders. The Doug Flutie Foundation for Autism, we also applied for this. This was a competitive grant around technology. We received some lovely letters from families within the STAR program who we submitted with our application, and we were the recipient of $2,700, which we used to increase our reading program by buying the Edmark reading program and also updating our board maker software, which had been outdated. So this was a chance for us to upgrade to the newer version with enhanced vocabulary, visuals, and all kinds of functions. And then this year we have two grants that we wrote and received. One was for $121,000, and then one was for about $10,000. So again, one was up towards the upper grades, and then the second one was more geared towards our pre-K. This is where a lot of our funding is coming for our workshops, our parent engagement, and our staff training. So another piece, which I'll talk about later, is increasing the capacity of our district to meet the needs of all of our students. I talked a little bit about this in our last presentation, and that's looking at specially designed training for our teachers and our staff. So we have probably about 7 teachers right now engaged in some very specific reading instruction. It's not just geared towards special ed, but looking at utilizing those specially designed instructions in our tier 1 and tier 2 supports as we look at our MTSS model and provide preventative instruction instead of that wait to fail model of special education and specially designed instruction. So that's most of what that money is going toward. We're also updating some curriculum materials. We've done some contracted services, but a big portion of this is really focused on that staff and parent engagement. Any questions with that? So some of our return on investment topics is our return to school services. So that was a really, really important piece for us last year. We worked really hard to identify that. We had very strong data to show the need for those services. We've utilized them, and that's really something that we're really seeing a return on our investment about supporting students and helping them maintain their academic, behavioral, and emotional health in school. The second one is what I just talked about. It's really investing in our teachers and our staff and our service providers to create a bigger capacity for us to meet the needs of all of our learners. So we have specialized training taking place currently with Lyndon Bell, which is a provider of reading, writing, visualization, and then Orton Gillingham, which is similar to a Wilson reading, but a more broad span of services that happen with it. And then we've also invested in an assistive technology consultant. So this person, we are a one-to-one device. but oftentimes there's specific apps or add-ons or other technology that's more specific to our special ed students. So this person contracts and comes into the district once a month. She provides consultation with our teachers, our students, or in collaboration with both. And it's really about meeting those needs. So if we hear that there's something that's not being able to be accessed or not in an efficient way in the classroom, Cheryl will come in and she will meet with the teacher, she'll meet with the student, and they'll figure out a way to utilize technology to best meet the student's needs. So that's been ongoing. We started that, I think, halfway last year, and then we have her this year too. And again, it's about once a month. Sometimes if there's a need, we'll bring her in twice a month, but she's here at least once a month to provide that support. We had two program efficiencies and savings. So our Pearson Digital Assessment Library is we've moved all of our assessment materials for evaluations, initial entry or evals online. So Pearson has this huge library of, over 45 different assessments that are available that we can use. Some of our teachers use devices, iPads to administer. Some just use the software for scoring. Some use a combination of both. We pay a flat fee for that every year. So that fee this year is $6,200. So that's what we pay for full access. I did some comparatives just because I figured you may ask. And testing materials in FY19 was at about $11,000. In FY20, we were at like $9,300. And then last year, when we implemented the DAL for the first year, we spent about $400 on assessments. And then this year, we're about $2,400, but that's because there was a new testing that came out, and those kits cost about $2,500. So typically, we would buy a couple of kits for the district, which would have cost us about $5,000. And then the $2,400 is really just our new protocols that go along with the new kits. So we saw a little increase this year, and again, it's just because of the new standardized assessment that came out, buying the materials that go along with it. But we did save $4,900 because if we had to buy the new kits, that's what it would have cost us. So we are seeing a nice savings in that. We are hearing a lot of positive feedback from the evaluators that they love using the technology. It's easier to score, and it's making their job a little bit less time-consuming and cumbersome because they're not hand scoring and handwriting all of that. And then the second one is our Docusign electronic signature software. So we moved to this right when I started in the district, actually. This was the first thing that we rolled out. And this is electronic signature software that we use to send all related IEP documents. It's secure and efficient delivery. The families don't have to set up any account or anything like that. So it comes into their screen, it's a quick click, and then you have automatic access to that document anytime you need it. So that has significantly increased our response time for IEPs. So we have, families have 30 days to respond. And then the system is set up for reminders. So we can send a reminder 25 days out. Then I send another reminder 30, and then I can send a 45, and I can send a 60. So it saved a lot of time for our administrative staff as well. Not standing at a copier all the time, not sending out envelopes and postage, and then being able to get a really quick response. So the automatic tracking, the reminders, and all of that has really been a nice savings. It's a little bit more hard to quantify the dollars on this one. We pay about $2,700 a year for this subscription. I can tell you that in FY19 and in FY20, we spent about $2,100 on postage alone. Last year, we spent about $465 on postage. And this year we're at about $230. The figures don't necessarily equate in because I don't have anything in here for paper and printing or anything around the use of the staff time in doing mails, like old-fashioned mailing. But we do see a significant savings and efficiency in using that Docusign electronic signature. So our SWOT analysis talks about all of the fun things. So for our SWOT analysis, we talked about our strengths and our weaknesses and figuring out where we're going to go from here. So we talk about our strengths. We have a great staff that has tons of expertise and experience, and that is seen on a daily basis, both in regular day-to-day and when we're looking at overall skills. Our parent collaboration is a strength. We have really active and engaged families who we partner with on a daily basis. And then our programming to meet the needs of our diverse learners. So we have As we talked about earlier, we have a wide continuum of services in the district to meet the needs of all of our learners. Some of the things that we look at for our weaknesses, which we're working on, is we have some outdated practices and procedures. So we have been working on that at the team chair level, looking to implement and update some of the forms and processes that we use that date back to the late 80s. So we're working on that. And then the bigger thing that we talked about in the fall is the consistency. So I know that Phil, you had mentioned it too, like that parent experience, right? So what we found is it really looked different at every level. And it wasn't consistent. So we've spent a lot of time at the department level with our team chairs leading the charge of really looking at how we can be more consistent. So when you see reading instruction at the elementary school and reading instruction at the middle school, it looks the same, it looks similar. So we've spent a lot of time on creating that consistent continuity across our districts. Another thing that was brought up to me in the fall was about the transition from building to building. So myself and the team chairs have dedicated a full day on Thursday to really tackle that transition and look at how we can make it a meaningful experience for our families. So that's something to keep the forefront. And then for our opportunities, we're always looking for ways on how we can deliver specialized instruction in a different way and improve that. And I'll talk a little bit about that later on. And then talking about always looking for ways to increase collaboration with our community partners. And that's what we talk about, our mental health providers, our local businesses, and a lot of other, different opportunities to bring our community into the school and our school into the community. And then the last one is our threats, which are never things we want to talk about, but they have to appear somewhere. So our biggest one is our lack of funding, which could result in loss of staff and program cuts. And then our other one that we deal with in special ed is increasing costs due to the unanticipated variables that we can't control. So unfortunately, there's a lot of things that we can control in special education, but there's also a couple of things that we don't have a lot of control over. And one of those is out-of-district tuitions. We can talk a little bit about that because I assume they'll have some questions. And the student needs. So those are things that we try to anticipate. I work diligently with Jay to stay updated on those, but unfortunately those are sometimes things that we just don't have control. So at this point, special education department is not asking for any things. We're looking for just level services across the board. We feel that we're in a position with the services that we have and the supports we have to adequately meet the needs of our students. Again, we are looking at reallocation, we're looking at improvements, we're looking at ways that we can tie into what we have and improve on what we do. So I'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. But at this point, as far as additional staffing, we don't think that there's a need for that. And that's usually our biggest one. And then future planning. So the first one is talking about that delivering in a different way. So right now, skills are really the focus in special education. So when we identify students for special education, it's based on a disability category and a need for specially designed instruction based on a skill deficit identified by the disability. So in the past, we've had what we've called a strategies lab, which has provided support around a variety of skills, sometimes writing, sometimes reading, sometimes math. What we found is that when you have a place of 8 to 10 students, all with varying levels, all with different goals, it's really hard to have effective instruction that's meaningful to the individual student. So next year, what we're doing is we're looking to really break down, and we've created courses relative to the skills that need to be addressed. So these are 3 of the courses that we'll be rolling out next year. Executive functioning, to focus just on that. Literacy, which is going to focus on your expressive and receptive language skills, your vocabulary, your written expression. We always have reading, that's a standard across the district. And then also a transition course at the high school. Looking at, really targeting our juniors and seniors to help them hone in on what post-secondary life looks like when they leave school. So those are our 3 new courses. Currently, right now, the special education departments at all levels are looking at curriculum materials to help support this transition and this shift from like a strategies lab to a more skill-based instruction. And we'll be finalizing those curriculums in the coming weeks and then moving forward with our courses. And then the second one is we're looking to explore the use of PowerSchool for special education records. So currently we use eSped. So all of our special education records and IEPs and 504s are stored on eSped. The district moved to PowerSchool a couple of years ago. PowerSchool does have a special education component that comprised of 504s and IEPs. So that is something that's on our radar to explore, to see if that is going to be a better use of our integration. So we would get rid of eSped, we would move everything onto PowerSchool, and we have one student management system that would handle all of our information. The nice added benefit of that too, if it's feasible, is that teachers would have instant access to all what they need. So right now we use an upload system for that, and it's just a little clunky. This would just make everything a little bit easier for our teaching staff as well. And then the final one is reviewing our specialized programming. So students change, needs change, and that's just making sure that we always have what the students need to meet their goals in our programming. Right now we have STAR, and we have a couple of small group classes. We're looking to see if there's another way to expand out and create some opportunities for other cohorts of kids that we see coming from elementary up to middle. That's it. Yeah, so that's it. Do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Sorry, it's hard to jump in from the Zoom
no,
in these groups. I didn't see, Jen, the reflection of the staff for the return to school services in what you listed here as your staff. Is the adjustment counselor, is that reflected in your budget? Does that come from somewhere else? How is that working?
That's a great point. So our return to school services are not under special education. It's a general ed initiative. So it's not reflected in mine, but I did speak on it just because we work so closely with it. And it is, it's kind of a group joint effort that we do, but it is not reflected in my staff just because it's a general ed.
Okay. And then I just wanted to make a comment too in your efficiencies section talking about the switch to the digital assessment library. I just wanted to make a point to the larger committee. This is a shift I made in my own district about 5 years ago, and the efficiencies are really important in terms of budget considerations, not just in the investment in the testing materials, because it does save a lot of money because you only have to buy what you need rather than entire testing protocols where you're only using 1 or 2 subtests. But in terms of efficiency and time for your staffing, we have found over the last 5 years that staff members are able to meet testing requirements in a way that's much faster and in ways that make interpretation and presentation easier for families and staff members, which frees up a lot more time for direct student services. So I think that's a really important shift and something that I understand very, very well and may not be as understandable to the rest of the committee, but I think that's a really important shift in terms of efficiency and money saving for the department.
Thank you for that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So no, that's good to hear. So if it's not, going back to her question about the budget, for the return to school services, if it's not in the student support services budget, what area of the budget is it in?
You're talking about the adjustment counselors, guidance.
It's in guidance, yeah. So that's actually part of the Nimbuck school.
It is.
There's
Just
that
composition
is the.
Like 710 if you want to look at.
Look at that. We'll look at that next week. The question I guess I other have is when we look at student support services, how many students today out of the total student population are covered by this budget?
414 students currently.
414. How many of those are out of district?
So we started FY21, we had 33 students out of district. Currently today we're at 24.
Oh, that's great. That's a significant impact.
Some of it's matriculation, age out. There's some movement. A couple of students just didn't need the services anymore. The sad part is, this is the part you're not going to enjoy, is that our budget hasn't changed. It's stayed pretty stable. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that because we anticipate when we have that number of decrease in the number of out of districts, we would see a decrease in the cost. One of the big indicators of that is the operational services division sets the prices for out of district placements. We don't have a ton of control over that. So occasionally we'll get a letter notifying us that so-and-so has put in for a tuition increase. They allow input from the school districts, but I don't know how meaningful the input is. And last year we had one of our placements who was approved for almost 30% increase, which was almost a $60,000 budgetary impact. So, you know, it's hard to kind of just look at numbers and think, you know, the natural trend would be our numbers are down, our expenses should be down, but there's so many variables in those audit district placements, it's really hard to do comparables like that.
Well, clearly a day program is less expensive than a residential program
Yes.
in most cases. You know, when you look at that.
You would think, but then we have the transportation piece.
Yeah.
So when I look at our transportation numbers, which are, again, that is another piece of what goes into it. We were a little bit lower last year, but I think it was because some of our more compromised students didn't attend last year. They were doing still remote learning. If they were out for a COVID day, they weren't transporting them for the 2 weeks that they were isolated. So again, there's some variable in there that would impact it. So it's not as clean, I guess, to say. Okay, yeah, so.
So what percentage of our overall budget is allocated towards student support services?
So I want to say, so I
Okay.
We didn't hear that answer because it was outside the scope of the microphones.
You said it's about $9 million of the overall $38 million budget. So
Okay.
it's probably around, you know, quick math, 23%, somewhere in there. But Jay said it also that doesn't include those grant components as well that are there.
Okay.
Whatever you do it. So
So the question I had was around the special ed transportation budget. Now, how big is that? And is that included in SPED or transportation? How do we account for that?
So we have a special ed transportation line. Yep, that's broken down into public, collaborative, and private. So last year it was about $780,000. Again, I think that was a little bit lower than what we typically see, just because we still had some students that were participating remotely, and we also had a longer period of quarantine. So when some of our schools would shut down, or if students were close contacts, they were out for a week or two. So I do think that's relatively conservative. I don't have the FY20 number in front of me, but I do think some of those variables played into it being a little bit more conservative last year.
is our SPED transportation contracts, are those utilization based or are those time period based?
They're utilization based.
Well,
Yeah.
there's,
So
let's just say this. Also known as con.
year we're at, right, to date, we're at about 415,000. But Telstone's a little bit behind in their billing. So they're probably about, 50,000 lower than where they should be right now, just because of the processing of the invoices. So we're still, we're about 14, I would say about 450 right now is where we are.
Other questions? No?
Thank you.
Great. Thanks.
Oh,
Jen.
what?
Thank
Oh,
you.
I forgot one more thing. Sorry. This is a good one. So as you all, so as you all know, we participated in our tiered focus monitoring this year. I talked a little bit about it when I was here last time, about the different components, about our data submission, our site visit, our documentation follow-up. So hot off the press, I'm going to pass you out copies of this with our latest parent engagement flyer, is that we received our final report and the district is in full compliance in all areas. And there is no corrective action that we will follow up on. So our
That's great to hear.
is done. And I'm going to.
Very good.
So.
Great job for you and the department.
And yes, a big thank you to everyone who collaborated with us, the principals, Maureen, and all of our administrative support people. And we had some really great partners at the Department of Education who really facilitated this work. So thank you to all of them. So, thank you so much.
Yeah, the alarm went off just in time. All right, any other matters not anticipated by the committee? Don't think so. No correspondences, I don't believe. Future agenda items will include the school budget presentations for the elementary and the middle school. And with that, I will take a motion to roll call to executive session pursuant to MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Exemption number 2, to conduct contract negotiations with
Non-union personnel.
That was the motion, I think.
So, roll call vote.
Thank you, Dr.
Bill Pizarro, aye.
Eric Brown, aye.
John Nicholson, aye.
Carrie Lawrence, aye.
The ayes have it, and away we go. We'll clear everybody out into executive